to be reading some of these new no sleep stories. This one just came out 36 minutes ago from when I'm making this, so I haven't read it yet. I hope it's great. I think it will be, just by the way that it's been designed here. They're already using some great onomatopoeia, and I'm excited to read this. Thump. Nick turned over in bed, back to sleep. Thump, thump. It was probably nothing, he thought. He lay in his queen-size bed and listened for more noise. Nothing. He started to doze off again. Thump, thump, thump. Nick bolted wide awake. It was a new house. He had moved in a few weeks ago. He had heard a few creaks and groans before, but this was different, more rhythmic. He wiped the sand from his eyes and checked his phone for the time. 2:30 a.m. He put his phone back in his pocket and made for the bedroom door. Thump, thump, thump. It was probably just an animal, he thought. He still had to check. A first-time home buyer at 32 years of age. He felt he needed to do the responsible thing. Probably a raccoon. Best case scenario, he could scare it away. Worst case scenario, he'd be putting in a call for animal control and getting an extra cup of coffee before work in a few hours. Nick made his way down the stairs and saw a faint red light in the kitchen. Did he leave his oven on? He heard a shuffling and noticed a large amorphous shape had replaced his dining room table. He walked towards it, into the kitchen. Clunk. Bright searing lights turned on all over his kitchen and conjoined dining room right as he stepped through the threshold, as if he had stepped on a tripwire that activated them. His eyes took a second to adjust to the blinding brightness. He looked around where his dining room table had been. He saw 2 rows of people in theater-style seats facing the kitchen. He recognized all of them. His 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Pemberton, the guy who cut him off in traffic last Tuesday, and someone who looked exactly like the stock photo model from his insurer's website. He saw his college roommate, Chad, who still owed him $50 he borrowed and lost in a cryptocurrency pyramid scheme. Even his great-aunt Gertrude, sitting in the corner and crocheting a sweater that read, "It's your kitchen, Nick." Wait, didn't she die like 3 years ago? Nick thought to himself. They all watched him with an expectant look. The giant floodlights illuminated his kitchen, where he saw 2 podiums. One was empty, and the other was a middle-aged man with a comb-over and too much bronzer in an electric blue tuxedo who held a long baton with a small spear at its end. It was a microphone. What the hell? How did you people get... Nick started. Hey, Nick! The man in the blue tuxedo interrupted. I'm sure you're wondering what we're doing here. Isn't that right, folks? A din of agreement and nods of varying enthusiasm came from the crowd that almost paradoxically fit inside his modestly sized dining room. One man, who Nick recognized as his car mechanic from back when he lived in Boston, shouted, That's right. Well, Nick, my name is Chuck Basilton. The man at the podium said, his voice booming over speakers Nick couldn't find. And we're here to play. Chuck smiled and pointed the mic at the crowd. It's your kitchen. The crowd roared in unison. Nick looked around and felt a wave of vertigo. How did these people get here? There was a production crew, a cameraman, an on-air sign glowed red where he had hung his NASA deep space photo calendar. After a moment, Nick's awe and amusement turned into anger. No, I have to work in the morning. I'm calling the cops, Nick said calmly. A collective gasp from the crowd. Nick took his phone out of his pocket and dialed 911. Now, Nick, that isn't very sportsmanlike of you, Chuck crooned. What do we think of that, folks? The crowd booed and showed their thumbs down for Nick. Why don't you just be a good sport and play the game, Nick? Chuck added as Nick waited for the call to connect. Nick heard a momentary dial tone. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. Yes, I'm at 121 Chestnut Street and people have broken into my home. Nick answered calmly, a smirk growing on his face. Just play the game, Nick, the operator said calmly before hanging up. Wait, what? Hello? Nick exclaimed into the phone as he looked around the room. "You heard what the nice dispatcher said, Nick," said Chuck Basilton, and patted his hand on the empty podium. "Why don't you just come over here and play? The prize tonight is..." No, Nick interrupted. "So you have someone on the inside. I don't care. I know where the police station is. I'll just drive over there and tell them." "I wouldn't recommend that, Nick," Chuck said, his voice growing a bit more hostile. "Hey folks, what do we call a contestant that doesn't want to play?" "Loser," the crowd said in unison. Nick put on his shoes and grabbed his car keys. He opened his front door, but instead of seeing his quiet suburban street, the front door opened up into his kitchen. Nick ran to the back door. Before he opened it, he had a feeling he knew what he would see on the other side of the door. When Nick opened the door, he didn't see his backyard. He saw exactly what he had seen out the front door. He felt a dark and foreboding dread build in his gut. He turned back to his kitchen and looked at the empty podium. Chuck and the crowd looked at him longingly. Chuck motioned for Nick to come on stage. "What is it we say, folks?" Chuck said, holding back laughter and pointing his microphone to the crowd. "It's your kitchen," the crowd cheered. "That's right," Chuck said through eerily white teeth. "And that's all there is." Nick walked back to the kitchen. He saw they had moved his trash can to make room for the two podiums. He stood behind the podium and looked back at the crowd, dejected. Chuck beamed at Nick as cheesy game show music played from the speakers Nick still couldn't find. "So glad to have you here, Nick. Now tell us, where do you hail from?" Chuck asked. Nick was incredulous. "Here, I come from right here. We're in my house," Nick said, waving his hands around at, well, everything. "That's right, we're in your home. 121 Chestnut, isn't that right, folks?" Chuck exclaimed. "Or it wouldn't be." He turned the mic to the crowd as Nick closed his eyes in despair. "It's your kitchen." The crowd boomed. Eyes closed, Nick began to whisper to himself. "This isn't real. This is a dream. Just wake up, Nick. It was probably those noodles." "Nick, I assure you this is real," Chuck said. "It has nothing to do with those 9-day-old noodles you had for lunch the other day. Now, are you ready to play the game?" "Sure," Nick said with a resigned shrug. The crowd cheered. The lights felt hot on Nick's skin as Chuck took out some cue cards. "Okay, Nick, we're ready to start playing," Chuck said as he looked down at the first cue card. "What is your biggest regret?" As soon as Chuck had asked, all of the lights, save the spotlight trained on Nick, dimmed. Chuck shoved the microphone in Nick's face. "Is this hell?" Nick asked. The crowd erupted into raucous laughter, and Chuck brought the microphone back to his own face. "Well, that's not the answer, is it, folks?" Chuck asked. "No!" the crowd sang. "Now let's try this again," Chuck asked, the grin widening on his face. "What is your biggest regret?" "I don't know," Nick started. The crowd began to boo. "Okay, let me think. My biggest regret was probably not getting my master's in engineering." A loud siren rang as Nick was done talking. "That is correct," Chuck said with a mischievous grin. "Your biggest regret was breaking up with Janice. She was such a nice girl, you really could have made a life with her." "Wait, what? How do you know what my..." Nick started. "All right, folks," Chuck interrupted. He smiled into the camera and froze for a moment as the cheesy theme music played again. Lights dimmed, and a serious voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "All right, people, that's commercial. We're back in 5. In an instant, there were 2 people standing on either side of Chuck Basilton. One patted his face and seemed to be applying makeup, while the other handed to him a bottle of water. The water had a label that just said, "It's your kitchen," in plain black text over a white background. After the makeup artist and assistant walked off to God knows where, Basilton turned to Nick, his voice gravelly, his smile more subdued. "You're doing great, kid. The camera loves you." "What the hell is going on? How do you know my biggest regret? Why can't I leave?" Nick exclaimed. Chuck turned to the crowd, pointed a thumb at Nick, and asked, "How about these first-time jitters, folks, huh?" With a chuckle. Nick heard a voice he recognized from the crowd. It was his former employee from the power plant, Mike Schmidt. "Just play the game, Nick. Don't overthink it." Nick took his phone out of his pocket in an attempt to call his dad. "You really think that's going to do anything?" Chuck said with a sneer. His phone started to ring before blinking an out-of-service message. Nick tried to call again, but the phone ran out of battery. He had been charging it next to his bed all night. "How is this possible? Why are you here?" Nick screamed. The crowd seemed unfazed. He took a soup ladle off his counter and started destroying the podium. He must have hit it a dozen times, the cheap fiberboard coming apart. He struck the lights, shouting like a feral animal. He destroyed 2 of them and began laughing maniacally. "Whose kitchen is it now?" he exclaimed as he destroyed the set, the crowd now looking on with mild interest and disapproval. He pointed the ladle out to the crowd. "And why is my aunt here? What the fuck is that?" he shouted. Gertrude didn't even look up from her crochet. He turned back to Chuck Basilton and looked down and to his right. The podium he had just destroyed stood there with no visible sign of damage. The lights were on again, not a scratch to be seen. He pointed the ladle at Chuck Basilton's face and shouted at the top of his lungs, "What in the fuck is going on?" Chuck, completely unmoved by Nick's outburst, shrugged, leaned forward, and said, "I don't know, kid, it's just another gig for me." Nick gripped the large metal ladle in both hands like a baseball bat and hit Chuck square in the jaw. The man went down like a sack of potatoes. Blood pooled on the floor as Nick looked down. He heard the clunk of the spotlight turning back on and felt the heat on his neck. The voice came again. It wasn't from the speakers. It almost seemed to come from earbuds in Nick's ears, but he wasn't wearing earbuds. "All right, folks, we're back in 5, 4, 3. Nick saw the cameraman count 2 and 1 with his hand. Nick turned around to see Chuck Basilton, completely unscathed, standing at his podium, smiling his irritatingly charming grin. The theme music played. "All right, folks, welcome back. We're here with Nick tonight, and it's time to play." He pointed the mic at the crowd. Jesus Christ, dude. Who made this? Noski92. Beautiful writing, man. I really loved it when I had to stumble over every other sentence and retake it 6 times because it doesn't like make any sense. Like, okay, some of these sentences are just so long. First off, what is this sentence? Bright searing lights turned on all over his kitchen and conjoined dining room right as he stepped through the threshold, as if he had stepped on a tripwire that activated them. My biggest consideration with this piece is like, what is scary about it? Like, I get if you like woke up and there's like a bunch of people you know in a game show with a guy asking you questions, that would be like weird, I get, like strange, but it doesn't seem there's any like malice, and he can't like destroy anything, but like, so like I just don't understand what is terrifying. The guy is basically helping you out, man. It seems like you have some unrealized like thoughts, like you don't know what your biggest regret is, or you do and you like lied for some reason. All right, so since this is a scary personal experience and you've experienced this, first of all, I'd like to know how did you get this out? You know what I mean? How did am I reading this right now? If it's, from what it seems, you're just stuck here forever. But honestly, more than that, it seems like if you just answer the guy's questions, you'll get through this, and then like what, the show ends and you just get to like be fine again. I mean, they didn't even like damage your apartment. They just moved your trash cans over to put some podiums. Like, what are you talking about? You're out here just like killing a guy with a ladle, and he doesn't even care. He's just like trying to help you out, man. He's trying to get you on the big screen, and you're all out here yelling at him, hitting him like a baseball bat with a ladle. Like what are you doing? the whole bit. Okay, how many times do we say kitchen? 16 instances of kitchen, which is, I mean, it's not that bad. It's just like, okay, yeah, it's your kitchen, bro. Like, what does this mean? This is the most nothing burger story I've ever heard in my entire life. I'm sorry, dude. I just can't. What did... How's your address 121 Chestnut? Chestnut what? Lane? Plaza? Cove? Road? Street? Trail? No, just 121 Chestnut. There's no roads, there's no connecting passages to get to your home. It's just like a fucking building in a field somewhere. I think I get it actually. Is it the 121st chestnut tree and a chestnut tree farm? That actually makes some sense, and that gives it a little bit of a deeper level to the story now that I think of it. Because if you're alone and you live at the 121st chestnut tree in a farm, perhaps part of the horror of this is the insanity that you're slowly diving into as you have nowhere to go besides this farm. Maybe you have a deep unrenounced fear of chestnut trees, and you've been sentenced here as a damning banishment. You've been exiled to the chestnut farm, where you will now spend the rest of your days surrounded by that which you fear most. Maybe this is just like a I'm afraid of public speaking thing, and like that's why this is scary. Like, my God, if my aunt knew that the thing I regretted most was not continuing to date this random chick, I would be ruined. I would never recover. I don't know what I would do. Is that really what you're most scared of? I mean, no hate, but just interesting. I've got to say, man, Chuck Basilton, that's a legit name. We got some good names in here, man. Like Mrs. Pemberton, Chad, Aunt Gertrude, Nick. I mean, we can't forget about Nick, and of course Chuck Basilton is the heat of this operation. I just love how, like, I don't want to say stupid, but just maybe incompetent our speaker is here. You think that maybe you're getting abducted or you have like a hostage, like you can't get out and people broke into your home, and the best thing you can say to 911, calmly mind you, you say, yes, I'm at 121 Chestnut Street. Oh, it says street. Oh, my bad. I'm at 121 Chestnut Street and people have broken into my home. That is what you would say? You telling me if you had some like 20 people sitting in your house mysteriously in the middle of the night with a game show set up where you're being interrogated about some like weird things. Also, the guy's a mind reader. Your response to what's your emergency is that people have broken into your home and I'm at 121 Chestnut Street. Okay. Like, I mean, okay, I guess, man. Like, all right. This bit is so funny. What do we call a contestant that doesn't want to play? Loser. Unison is capitalized. The crowd said in unison. Oh, wait. The lore goes so much deeper now because Unison is a place. It's capitalized, so it has to be the name of a location. So that means the crowd is saying this in unison. Where is Unison located? Oh, wait. I just checked with my sources. Unison is an unincorporated community village in Loudoun County, Virginia. It is about 5 miles from Middleburg. It was founded in 1740 by Quakers that had migrated from Pennsylvania. Interesting. Population 30. Wait. Greatly outnumbered by the horses in the surrounding farms. Hold on. Wait a minute. Oh my God. The American chestnut, the native range for the plant, it just so happens to run through Virginia. Wait a minute. No, there's nothing special about this place. It does have an elevation of 482 feet above sea level. That's kind of cool. I don't know what to say. I think this ending is hilarious. The theme music played. All right, folks, welcome back. We're here with Nick tonight, and it's time to play It's Your Kitchen. Doo doo doo. Wow, that's so cool, man. Genius. All right, that's all I have to say for this one. I guess let's go next.